The impossible survivor. The stasis pod hissed open, releasing a cloud of cryogenic vapor that dissipated into the dim emergency lighting. Captain Nora Vance gasped awake, her lungs burning as they remembered how to breathe again. Pain lanced through her skull, and fragmented memories flashed behind her eyelids, explosions, screams, and darkness. System failure, life support at 23%. Imminent hull breach detected, announced the pod's AI in a calm, feminine voice that belied the dire circumstances. Nora's military training kicked in. She forced her trembling limbs to move, detaching monitoring sensors from her skin and pulling herself upright. Her escape pod was barely functioning, its viewscreen showing nothing but the endless void of space punctuated by distant stars. The tactical display was dead, orientation systems offline. She was alive but lost, the last surviving officer of the UES Defiant. The battle replayed in her mind. The Zithran Armada had appeared without warning, their massive hive ships emerging from jump points around Earth's orbital defense network. The Defiant had been the flagship of humanity's response, but they were hopelessly outmatched. Admiral Hudson's final order still echoed in her ears: scatter and survive, that's an order. She remembered Commander Jackson pushing her into the escape pod as the bridge collapsed around them. "Someone needs to tell the story," he'd said before sealing her in. The flash of the Defiant's reactor overload had been the last thing she saw before stasis took her. How long had she been drifting? Days, years. The pod's chronometer was dead. A sudden jolt rocked the pod, sending Nora tumbling against the bulkhead. The external cameras flickered to life, revealing a scuffed, industrial-looking tractor beam pulling her toward a ship that looked cobbled together from spare parts. Unidentified vessel approaching. Warning, scan indicates non-standard configuration, the AI reported. Pirates, scavengers, Nora muttered, reaching for the emergency sidearm stored beneath her seat. The weapon felt reassuringly solid in her hand as the pod was drawn into what appeared to be a makeshift cargo bay. The airlock cycled open with a reluctant groan. Nora braced herself against the pod's interior, weapon raised. "Easy with that," came a gruff male voice. "If I wanted you dead, I'd have left you to vacuum." A man stood in the doorway, his weathered face partially obscured by a patchy beard. He wore a captain's jacket that had seen better days, patched in multiple places with mismatched materials. Behind him hovered a small, spherical drone that emitted a soft blue glow. "Captain Ezra Kaiden of the Independent Transport Wayward," he said, keeping his hands visible. "And that's Iris, my ship's AI interface." The drone bobbed in acknowledgement. "Captain Nora Vance, United Earthship Defiant," she responded, not lowering her weapon. Ezra's eyebrows rose. "The Defiant, that's impossible. The Defiant was destroyed in the fall 3 years ago." The words hit Nora like a physical blow. 3 years. She'd been drifting in space for 3 years. "The fall," she managed to ask. Ezra's expression darkened. "Earth fell to the Zithran hive, along with most of the inner colonies, those of us who survived." He gestured vaguely to his ship. "We make do." Nora's legs gave out and she slumped back against the pod. Earth gone, her family, her home, everything gone. "Captain Vance's vital signs indicate shock," the drone Iris reported in a melodic voice. "Suggestion, medical bay." The next few hours passed in a blur. Ezra's medical bay was primitive compared to the Defiance, but it was sufficient to confirm that Nora was physically intact, if malnourished and weakened from extended stasis. As strength returned to her limbs, Ezra filled her in on what she'd missed. The Zithran hive had consolidated their hold on Earth and the inner colonies. Their queen, Zalera, had established her primary nest on what remained of Earth, using human survivors as labor and, according to rumor, as subjects for biological experimentation. The outer colonies had formed a fragile resistance, but they were outnumbered and outgunned. "So why save me?" Nora asked, watching Ezra work on salvaging components from her pod. "Resources are scarce. Taking on another mouth to feed isn't the most strategic move." Ezra paused, wiping grease from his hands. "Iris detected something unusual about your pod, some kind of interference pattern we've never seen before. Thought it might be worth investigating." Iris hovered closer to Nora, scanning her with a thin beam of light. "Anomaly detected. Captain Vance's neural patterns show signs of non-human alteration." "What?" Nora jerked away from the scans. "Don't worry," Ezra said, raising a hand. "Iris isn't suggesting you're not human, but something's different about you. Have you noticed anything strange, abilities you didn't have before?" Nora was about to dismiss the question when she remembered something odd. In the pod, she'd found herself understanding the damage reports at a level deeper than she should have. It was as if she could feel the systems failing, not just read the data. The pod systems, I could sense them, like they were extensions of myself. Ezra exchanged a meaningful look with his AI. There was a rumor, he said slowly, about a classified project before the fall, something called Nexus. Military personnel being enhanced to interface directly with technology, including alien tech. I was never part of any such project, Nora insisted. Maybe not knowingly, Ezra replied, but it would explain why your stasis pod kept you alive for 3 years on minimal power, and why you survived it all. Before Nora could respond, the ship's alarms blared. Iris's color shifted from blue to pulsing red. Zithran patrol detected, 2 intercept vessels on approach. Ezra cursed, rushing to the cockpit with Nora close behind. Through the viewport, she could see the distinctive organic shapes of Zithran fighters, their hulls pulsing with bioluminescent patterns. "They're hailing us," Iris reported. "Ignore it," Ezra ordered, hands flying over the controls. "Charging jump drive." "Jump drive?" Nora asked incredulously, "on a ship this size?" "Salvaged from a colonial cruiser," Ezra replied with a hint of pride. "It'll work, probably." The Zithran ships fired warning shots, energy pulses that crackled past the Wayward's hull. Nora felt a strange sensation, a tingle at the base of her skull. Without thinking, she placed her hand on a nearby console. The ship's system seemed to open up to her consciousness, data flowing into her mind. "Your jump calculations are off," she said, eyes widening in surprise at her own certainty. "The gravitational distortion from that debris field will tear us apart." Ezra stared at her. "How could you possibly?" "Trust me," Nora's fingers moved across the console, making adjustments she somehow knew were correct. "Try now." With no time to argue, Ezra activated the jump sequence. The stars outside elongated into streaks as the Wayward lurched forward, slipping between dimensions. The ship shuddered violently, then stabilized as they emerged from the jump, the Zithran ships nowhere in sight. "That was," Ezra began, his voice trailing off as he examined the navigation data. "That was impossible. You just performed jump calculations in your head that would take Iris several minutes." Nora looked down at her hands, disturbed by what had just happened. "What did they do to me?" Ezra's expression softened slightly. "I don't know, but whatever it is, it just saved our lives." In the days that followed, Nora began to understand the extent of her abilities. She could interface with any technology on the Wayward, accessing systems at a level even Iris couldn't match. When they docked at a hidden outpost in the asteroid belt of a forgotten star system, she found she could sense the presence of Zithran technology from a distance, feeling it like a discordant note in a symphony. The outpost was home to a ragtag group of resistance fighters, civilians, and military personnel who had escaped the fall. Their leader, a former colonial governor named Thorn, was initially skeptical of Nora's story. "No one survived the Defiant," he said, arms crossed over his broad chest. "I saw the footage." "And yet here I stand," Nora replied evenly. "And I bring information about Earth's final defense systems, information that might help us fight back." Thorn's expression remained guarded. "What good are defense codes for systems that no longer exist?" "Because the Zithran don't destroy technology," Ezra interjected. "They repurpose it. They're using our own orbital platforms against us." A murmur ran through the assembled resistance members. Nora stepped forward. "I can do more than provide codes," she said. "I can interface with their technology. I can help you infiltrate their systems." "If what you say is true," Thorn said slowly, "then you're the most valuable asset we've encountered since the fall." "Or the most dangerous," added a woman with tactical officer insignia. "How do we know the Zithran haven't sent her as a trap?" "She interfaced with my ship's systems," Ezra defended. "She can sense their tech. Whatever was done to her, it gives her an edge we desperately need." Thorn considered this, then nodded. "There's one way to prove your value, Captain Vance. We've located a minor Zithran outpost on the moon of Callisto. If you can help us infiltrate it, extract their communications data." "I'll do it," Nora said without hesitation. "When do we leave?" As preparations began for the mission, Nora stood at a viewport, gazing at the distant pinprick of light that was Jupiter. Somewhere beyond it, Earth waited, no longer the blue jewel she remembered, but a conquered world. Her world. Having second thoughts, Ezra asked, joining her. No, she replied. For the first time since I woke up, I feel like I have a purpose. Whatever they did to me, whatever I've become, I'm going to use it. I'm going to make the Zithran regret leaving any of us alive. Ezra studied her face. The outpost is controlled by a sub-queen, a direct genetic descendant of Queen Zalara herself if she detects your presence. Then she'll learn that humans aren't as easy to exterminate as she thought, Nora finished, her reflection in the viewport hardening with determination. I'm ready, confrontation. The Zithran outpost on Callisto loomed before them, a structure that defied human architectural logic. It resembled a massive hive, its exterior composed of a biomechanical material that pulsed with faint bioluminescence. Tendrils of the structure extended into the moon's surface like roots, drawing resources from deep within. Nora, Ezra, and two resistance fighters named Garrett and Vex approached in a stolen Zithran shuttle. Nora sat in the pilot's seat, her hands hovering above the organic controls. Unlike human technology, interfacing with Zithran systems felt intrusive, like plunging her consciousness into a viscous, alien mindscape. I can feel them, she whispered, eyes closed in concentration. Hundreds of drones, workers, soldiers, and something else, something powerful at the center. The sub-queen, Garrett murmured, checking his modified pulse rifle. The former colonial marines face bore scars from previous encounters with Zithran forces. Vex, a slight woman who had once been a systems specialist for a mining corporation, monitored her handheld scanner. Landing bay defenses are active, but they're not targeting us. Your mimicry signal is working, Captain. For now, Nora replied, guiding the shuttle toward an opening in the hive structure. But once we're inside, the organic components of the hive might sense we're not Zithran. We'll need to move quickly. The shuttle slipped into the landing bay, settling among similarly designed craft. The interior of the bay pulsed with the same bioluminescence as the exterior, casting everything in an eerie blue-green glow. Nora felt a pressure building behind her eyes, the hive's awareness brushing against her consciousness. They know something's wrong, she said, rising from her seat. Not what exactly, but they sense an anomaly. Ezra handed her a weapon, then let's not overstay our welcome. The team moved through the organic corridors of the hive, following Nora's intuitive understanding of the structure's layout. Worker drones, partially transformed humans with chitinous implants and compound eyes, passed them occasionally but seemed too focused on their tasks to question their presence. The communication hub should be 2 levels down, Nora whispered, leading them to what appeared to be a growth in the wall. She placed her hand against it and the material parted like a sphincter, revealing a passage downward. That's disgusting, Garrett muttered. That's alien efficiency, Vex countered. Their entire structure is alive. The communication hub was a vast chamber filled with what looked like transparent sacs containing glowing fluid. Tendrils extended from these sacs to the walls and ceiling, carrying information throughout the hive. Cover me, Nora said, approaching the central node, a larger sac pulsing with more intense light. I need to interface directly. Is that safe? Ezra asked, concern evident in his voice. Probably not, Nora admitted, but it's the only way to access their network quickly. Before anyone could object further, she pressed her palm against the central node. The sensation was immediate and overwhelming, like plunging her mind into a chaotic ocean of alien thoughts and sensations. Information flooded her consciousness: tactical data, drone deployment patterns, communications from the Queen herself. And something else, something that made her blood run cold. They're harvesting us, she gasped, struggling to maintain the connection while retaining her sense of self. Not just for labor. They're experimenting with human DNA, trying to incorporate certain traits into their hive genetics. What traits? Vex asked, nervously watching the entrance. Adaptability, creativity, individual thought. Nora winced as a surge of data threatened to overwhelm her. The Queen sees these as both our weakness and our strength. She's trying to. A piercing alarm cut through the air, a sound that was both mechanical and organic. The bioluminescence throughout the chamber shifted from blue-green to pulsing red. We've been detected, Garrett announced unnecessarily, raising his weapon. Nora tried to disengage from the node, but something was holding her consciousness, examining her. She felt like a specimen under a microscope, her very being dissected by an alien intelligence. Someone's coming, Ezra warned, taking position beside the entrance. Something big. Nora finally broke free of the connection, staggering backward. We need to leave, now. Too late, the entrance dilated open, and four Zithran warriors entered, towering insectoid creatures with armored exoskeletons and multiple limbs ending in what could be either weapons or tools. Behind them came a larger figure, her form more elegant but no less alien. Where the warriors were purely insectoid, this being retained a disturbing hint of humanity in her features, as if human and alien DNA had been forcibly merged. The sub-queen stood nearly 8 feet tall, with an iridescent carapace and 4 arms. Her face was a horrifying blend of human and insect, with compound eyes flanking what might once have been a human nose and mouth. A crown-like growth extended from her forehead, pulsing with the same red light that now filled the chamber. "Intruders," she said, her voice a discordant harmony of human speech and clicking mandibles. "How unexpected." Garrett opened fire, his pulse rounds deflecting harmlessly off the warrior's armor. One of the creatures lunged forward with impossible speed, impaling him through the chest with a chitinous limb. "No," Vex cried, but Ezra pulled her back, returning fire with his own weapon. Nora raised her gun but found herself unable to move, held in place by some invisible force. The sub-queen approached her directly, ignoring the firefight around them. "You," she said, her compound eyes reflecting Nora's terrified face back at her. "You're different." A chitinous hand grasped Nora's jaw, turning her face from side to side as if examining a curious specimen. "Your mind touched our network, but it didn't break. Impossible for a mere human." With a final burst of gunfire, Ezra and Vex were subdued, their weapons wrenched away by the surviving warriors. "Take them to the transformation chambers," the sub-queen ordered without looking away from Nora. "This one comes with me." Nora was dragged through the hive, separated from her companions. Her mind raced, searching for options, for any way to exploit her unique abilities to escape. The sub-queen led her to a chamber deep within the structure, a space that resembled a grotesque throne room. The walls were lined with transparent containers holding partially transformed humans in varying stages of Zithranization. The sub-queen settled onto a raised dais, her 4 arms arranged in a posture that somehow conveyed both relaxation and readiness to strike. "Do you know what you are?" she asked, her voice echoing in the chamber. "Human," Nora replied defiantly. "Captain Nora Vance, United Earthship Defiant." "The Defiant," the sub-queen repeated, a sound like laughter clicking from her mandibles. "Yes, we remember destroying that ship. No survivors." "Clearly your information is flawed." The sub-queen tilted her head. "Not flawed, you were altered, changed. I can sense it, human, but more. The question is, by whom?" A door at the far end of the chamber opened, and another figure entered, larger than the sub-queen, her carapace adorned with intricate patterns that seemed to shift and change with each movement. 4 guards flanked her, their posture deferential. "Mother," the sub-queen said, immediately lowering herself in a bow. "I didn't expect your presence." Nora felt her blood freeze in her veins. This was no mere sub-queen. This was Zalera herself, the Zithran queen who had orchestrated Earth's fall. Queen Zalera approached slowly, her attention fixed entirely on Nora. Unlike the sub-queen, Zalera retained even more humanoid features, a calculated choice, Nora suspected, designed to unsettle human opponents. "I felt a disturbance in the network," Zalera said, her voice surprisingly melodious. "A human mind that didn't shatter upon contact, impossible unless." She reached out, placing a hand on Nora's forehead. The contact burned like ice, and Nora felt the queen's consciousness pressing against her own, a vastly more powerful version of what she'd experienced with the network node. "Fascinating," Zalora whispered. "You carry the markers of Project Nexus, the humans' last desperate attempt to counter us." Nora's eyes widened. "I was never part of any project." "Not consciously, perhaps, but your DNA has been modified, your neural pathways reconfigured to interface with technology, including ours." The queen's compound eyes seemed to gleam with something like satisfaction. "We destroyed that facility. All subjects were terminated." "Well," Nora managed through gritted teeth, "I've always been hard to kill." The queen stepped back, and for the first time, Nora saw genuine surprise in her alien features. "You were never meant to survive," Zalera said, her voice barely audible. "Your existence is an aberration." Before Nora could respond, an explosion rocked the chamber. Alarms blared throughout the hive, and the queen's guards moved to protective positions. "The outpost is under attack," one reported. "Human resistance vessels." Nora couldn't help the smile that spread across her face. Looks like I'm not the only survivor you underestimated. Queen Zalara's features hardened. Take her to my ship. If she is indeed a Nexus subject, she will provide valuable data. As guards moved to seize her, Nora felt something shift in her awareness, a tingling at the base of her skull that had become familiar. The hive systems were all around her, part of the living structure itself. And if she could interface with Zithran technology. She closed her eyes, focusing her consciousness outward, pushing it into the organic circuitry of the chamber. The lights flickered, and the restraints holding her suddenly released. "What is happening?" the sub-queen demanded as more explosions echoed through the structure. Nora didn't wait for the confusion to pass. She lunged forward, grabbing a weapon from the nearest guard. The biomechanical gun felt alive in her hands, responding to her touch as if it had been designed for her. "Stop her," Zalara commanded, but Nora was already firing, the weapon discharging pulses of energy that struck with perfect accuracy. She backed toward the exit, keeping the weapon trained on the queen. "Your mistake was thinking humans would submit," she said. "We don't give up, we adapt, we survive." Another explosion, closer this time, sent chunks of the ceiling crashing down. Through the new opening above, Nora could see a human vessel hovering the wayward, its weapons systems blazing. "Nora," Ezra's voice came through on an open channel. "If you can hear me, get ready for extraction." A cable dropped through the opening. Nora grabbed it, the weapon still aimed at the Zithran queen. "This isn't over," Zalara hissed. "You are an anomaly, the rest of your kind will fall." "We'll see about that," Nora replied as the cable began to retract, pulling her up toward the ship. "Humanity isn't as easy to eradicate as you thought." As she was lifted into the wayward, Nora caught a glimpse of something she never expected to see: fear in the alien queen's eyes. The knowledge that humans could adapt, could develop countermeasures to Zithran technology, had shaken Zalara's confidence in her inevitable victory. Aboard the ship, Nora found Ezra at the controls, with Vex beside him, bloodied but alive. "Garrett?" Nora asked, already knowing the answer. Ezra shook his head grimly. "We got the data, though, and we got you." "How did you escape the warriors?" Nora asked Vex. A smile crossed the technician's battered face. They underestimated how much damage a mining specialist can do to organic circuits. As the wayward broke atmosphere, pursued by Zithran fighters, Nora placed her hand on the ship's console, feeling the systems respond to her touch. The jump drive powered up instantly, calculations flowing through her mind and into the ship's computers. "Hold on," she warned as space folded around them, the little ship slipping between dimensions to emerge light years away, near the Resistance's hidden base. Later, as the Resistance leaders reviewed the data they'd stolen, a new sense of hope spread through the outpost. The Zithran communication logs revealed vulnerabilities, weaknesses in the hive structure that could potentially be exploited. "You've given us a fighting chance," Thorne told Nora, his earlier skepticism replaced by cautious optimism. "For the first time since the fall, we have actual intelligence on their operations." Nora nodded, but her mind was elsewhere, still processing her encounter with Queen Zalara. Project Nexus, a name that meant nothing to her, yet apparently explained everything about what she had become. "What will you do now?" Ezra asked, joining her at the viewport where she stood watching the stars. "I need answers," she replied, "about what was done to me, about Project Nexus." And then, she turned to face him, determination hardening her features. "I'm going to become the weapon they created me to be. The Queen looked at me with fear today. Next time I want her to look at me and see her end." Ezra studied her face for a moment. "You know, before all this, I was just a smuggler trying to stay alive. Now I'm following a woman who can interface with alien tech into the heart of enemy territory." A smile tugged at Nora's lips. "Having second thoughts, Captain Kaiden?" "Nah," he replied, returning her smile. "Just thinking that if anyone can lead humanity back from the brink, it might be the woman who wasn't meant to survive." Outside the viewport, distant stars glimmered, some harboring Zithran-controlled worlds, others potential havens for human survivors. The war for humanity's future was far from over, but for the first time since the fall, the scales had begun to shift. Queen Zalara had made a critical error. She had assumed that by destroying Earth, she had broken humanity's spirit. She didn't understand that humans were at their most dangerous when fighting for survival. And in Captain Nora Vance, the impossible survivor with impossible abilities, humanity had found not just a weapon but a symbol. The resistance would grow, the fight would continue, and the queen who had conquered Earth would learn that some species don't know how to surrender, they only know how to evolve, adapt, and overcome.